Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. The ship moved slowly through space near the edge of human territory. It had been 3 months since humanity joined the Galactic Federation, and Jake still felt like an outsider among all the alien species. "Captain, we're getting something strange on the communications array," said Amy Walsh from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, a young woman with bright red hair who could speak 6 different alien languages. Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of strange?" Amy's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "It's a distress signal, but it's not like anything I've seen before. It's broadcasting on every frequency at once in every known language in the galaxy." Lisa Carter, the ship's pilot, turned around in her chair. "That's impossible. No one has that kind of transmission power." Tony Rodriguez looked up from the engineering station. "The signal strength is off the charts. Whoever is sending this has technology we can't even understand." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Put it on the main screen." The viewing screen changed to show a massive holographic figure. It looked like it was made of pure light, with features that seemed to shift and change as they watched. When it spoke, its voice filled the bridge with a sound like music mixed with thunder. "People of the galaxy, this is Elder Zephyr of the Keepers. Our homeworld of Sanctuary Prime is under attack by forces beyond description. The Void Swarm has come to our system and is consuming everything in its path. They eat matter, energy, and even space itself. Soon they will destroy our world and spread across the galaxy. We need help. Please, anyone who can hear this, we are begging for your aid." The message repeated several times before the signal ended. The bridge fell silent as the crew stared at the empty screen. "The Keepers," whispered Lisa. "I thought they were just legends." Tony shook his head. "My grandfather told me stories about them. They're supposed to be the oldest race in the galaxy. They helped build the Federation thousands of years ago." Jake turned to Amy. "Send a message to Earth Command immediately. They need to know about this." Back on Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan sat in her office at Federation Command when the message arrived. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had spent most of her life in the military. She had short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She watched the Keeper's message 3 times before calling her staff into the meeting room. Within an hour, the room was full of generals, admirals, and scientists. "So what do we know about this Void Swarm?" Kate asked. Dr. Helen Brooks, the head of alien biology research, spoke first. "Almost nothing. There are a few old records that mention something like this, but they're mostly considered myths. The stories say they appear every few thousand years and destroy entire star systems." General Rick Hayes, a tall man with a scar across his left cheek, leaned forward. "What about the other Federation species? What are they doing?" Kate pulled up a list on the main screen. "I've been monitoring Federation communications all morning. Let me show you what our allies are saying." The screen showed messages from across the galaxy. The Ethereal Collective, beings of pure psychic energy, had sent a formal response saying the mission was too dangerous for rational beings to attempt. The Resonance Empire, a race of crystal creatures, had calculated that any rescue mission had less than a 1% chance of success. The Nebula Confederacy had simply ignored the message completely. "What about the Zephyrians?" asked Dr. Brooks. Kate scrolled down the list. "They said their ships can't handle the radiation levels near Sanctuary Prime. The Aquatic Alliance claims their technology isn't compatible with the mission requirements. The Machine Collective is running probability calculations and expects to have an answer in 6 months." The room buzzed with conversation. As everyone tried to understand what they were hearing, General Hayes slammed his hand on the table. "Are you telling me that every single advanced civilization in the galaxy is just going to let the Keepers die?" Kate nodded slowly. "It looks that way. They all have very logical reasons for not helping. The journey to Sanctuary Prime goes through the Crimson Nebula, which is considered impossible to navigate. The Void Swarm itself is something no one understands or knows how to fight. From their point of view, sending ships would just mean losing them for nothing." Dr. Brooks looked confused. "But the Keepers helped create galactic civilization. Without them, none of these species would have advanced beyond their home systems. Gratitude doesn't override survival instincts," said General Hayes. "At least not for them." Kate stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the sprawling base. She could see human ships being prepared for various missions across Federation space. Young men and women hurried back and forth, loading supplies and running final checks on equipment. "Ma'am?" General Hayes said quietly. "What are your orders?" Kate turned back to face the room. Her decision was already made, had been made the moment she heard the distress call. We're going to help them. The room erupted in voices as everyone tried to speak at once. Dr. Brooks stood up. Admiral, with respect, if the other species think this is impossible, what makes us think we can succeed? Kate smiled, but there was no humor in it. Because we're humans, Doctor. We don't know enough to be smart about what's impossible. General Hayes was already taking notes. What kind of force are we talking about? Everything we can spare, Kate said. I want our best ships and our best people. This isn't going to be easy, and we're probably going to lose people, but someone sent out a distress call and that means we answer it. She walked back to her chair and sat down. I want plans for a rescue mission on my desk in 12 hours. Contact Captain Morrison and tell him to return to Earth immediately. We're going to need experienced deep space crews for this. As the meeting broke up and people hurried to carry out their orders, Kate remained in her chair, staring at the empty screen where the Keeper's message had played. She thought about all the logical reasons why humanity should stay home, all the sensible arguments for not risking their ships and people on an impossible mission. Then she thought about her father, who had died trying to rescue survivors from a burning building. She thought about her brother, who had given his life saving his squad from an enemy ambush. She thought about what it meant to be human. Someone had called for help. That was all that mattered. News of humanity's decision spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. In the crystal spires of the Resonance Empire, the High Crystalline Council gathered in emergency session. Their leader, a being of pure diamond who spoke in harmonic frequencies, expressed what many were thinking. The humans have announced they will attempt a rescue mission to Sanctuary Prime. Our calculations show this to be suicide. Perhaps it is time to reconsider their membership in the Federation. Similar conversations happened on worlds across the galaxy. The Ethereal Collective sent messages to their allies warning about human recklessness. The Machine Collective updated their threat assessments of humanity, noting dangerous levels of illogical behavior. But on Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan was too busy to care about galactic opinion. She stood in the main hangar of Luna Base, watching as the UES Defiance was being retrofitted for the mission. The ship was a heavy cruiser, built for long-range exploration and combat. Now it was being modified with the best technology humanity could provide. Captain Jake Morrison walked up beside her. He had arrived from the horizon just 6 hours ago and was still wearing his deep space uniform. Admiral, the modifications look impressive. But are you sure this is the right call? Kate didn't take her eyes off the ship. Jake, how long have you been in space? 15 years, ma'am. In those 15 years, how many distress calls have you answered? Jake thought for a moment. Maybe 20 or 30. Mining accidents, ship breakdowns, pirate attacks. Did you ever ask yourself if it was worth the risk before you went to help? Jake smiled. No, ma'am. When someone needs help, you help them. That's what we do. Kate finally turned to look at him. That's exactly right. And that's why we're the only species in the galaxy stupid enough to try this. Dr. Helen Brooks hurried over to them carrying a datapad. She was a small woman with wild curly hair who always seemed to be in motion. Admiral, I've been studying everything we can find about the Keepers and this void swarm. The information is limited, but I think I understand why the other species are so scared. Show me what you found, Kate said. Helen activated her datapad, and a holographic display appeared in the air. The Keepers are ancient, older than any other known species. They exist as pure energy beings, which means they don't have physical bodies like we do. Their homeworld, Sanctuary Prime, is located beyond the Crimson Nebula. The display changed to show a region of space that looked like a red storm. Lightning-like energy discharges flashed between clouds of cosmic dust and debris. The Crimson Nebula is a navigation nightmare, Helen continued. Gravitational anomalies that can tear ships apart, radiation levels that would kill most species in minutes, and spatial tears that can fold ships into dimensions that don't exist. Jake whistled quietly. No wonder everyone thinks we're crazy. It gets worse, Helen said. The few records we have about void swarms describe them as entities that consume reality itself. They don't just destroy matter and energy. They erase the space where things used to exist. Fighting them with conventional weapons is like trying to punch a hole in the universe. Kate studied the display. What makes us different? Why do you think we might succeed where others would fail? Helen smiled for the first time since Jake had met her. Because we're from Earth. Do you know what the other species call our planet? I've heard rumors, Kate said. A Class 12 Deathworld, the highest danger rating they have. Most inhabited worlds in the galaxy have stable weather, predictable seasons, and environments that don't try to kill everything that lives there. Earth has ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, mass extinctions, and predators that hunt in packs. Jake was beginning to understand. You're saying we're used to dealing with impossible situations. Exactly, Helen said. Every human who has ever lived descended from ancestors who survived conditions that would terrify most galactic species. We adapt, we improvise, and we keep fighting even when logic says we should give up. Colonel Rick Hayes joined their group. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man who moved like a predator. His Marines were the best Earth had to offer, veterans of conflicts across human space. Admiral, my people are ready, he said. We've been studying what little combat data exists about void swarms. Standard military doctrine won't work here, so we're preparing for asymmetric warfare. What does that mean? Kate asked. Rick grinned, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. It means we're going to fight dirty. Guerrilla tactics, improvised weapons, psychological warfare. The kind of fighting that civilized species consider beneath them. Dr. Carl Jensen, the mission's xenobiologist, approached with another data pad. He was a quiet man who spent most of his time studying alien cultures and biology. Admiral, I've found something interesting in the historical records. Every species that has encountered void swarms followed the same pattern. They used their most advanced technology, their most logical strategies, and their most efficient military doctrines, and they all failed. Kate took the data pad and scrolled through the information. What are you suggesting? That maybe logic and efficiency aren't the answer here. Maybe the void swarm expects logical responses and has learned to counter them. But humans, Carl paused, humans are the first species they'll encounter that operates on determination instead of logic. Tony Rodriguez climbed down from the Defiance's engine compartment, his uniform covered in grease and coolant. Admiral, we've finished the modifications. The ship now has triple redundant shields, emergency backup systems for every critical component, and enough spare parts to rebuild half the ship if necessary. Lisa Carter walked over from the pilot simulator, where she had been practicing navigation through the Crimson Nebula. I've run the course 100 times. It's going to be rough, but I think we can make it. Amy Walsh looked up from her communications equipment. I've established quantum entanglement links with Earth. We'll be able to send status updates even from beyond the nebula. Kate looked around at the assembled crew. These were her people, volunteers all who had stepped forward when the call went out. They weren't the strongest species in the galaxy, or the smartest or the most technologically advanced, but they were the only ones willing to try. How long until we're ready to launch? She asked. Jake checked his chronometer. 6 hours, Admiral. The crew is finishing final preparations now. Kate nodded. Then we launch at 800 tomorrow. And people... She paused, looking each of them in the eye. I want you to understand what we're doing here. We're not just trying to save the Keepers. We're showing the galaxy what it means to be human. When someone calls for help, we answer. Even if it's impossible. Especially if it's impossible. As the crew dispersed to make final preparations, Kate remained in the hangar, watching technicians work on the Defiance. In a few hours, they would launch into the unknown, heading for a place where logic said they would die. But logic had never stopped humans before. The UES Defiance shuddered as it entered the edge of the Crimson Nebula. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair as the ship was hit by the first wave of gravitational distortions. Around him, his crew worked frantically to keep the ship stable. Lisa, how are we doing on navigation? Jake called out. Lisa Carter's hands moved quickly over her controls, sweat beading on her forehead. The gravity fields are worse than the simulations predicted. I'm having to plot a new course every few minutes. The ship lurched violently to one side as a massive gravitational wave hit them. Sparks flew from several control panels and the lights flickered. Tony, what's our status? Jake asked. Tony Rodriguez was already crawling under his engineering console. We've lost the port shield generator and 2 of the backup power cores, but the main engines are still good. Dr. Helen Brooks worked at her medical station preparing for casualties. Captain, I'm reading radiation levels that would be fatal to most species. Our crews can handle it, but barely. Colonel Rick Hayes stood near the tactical display watching as red warning lights appeared across their projected path. Jake, we've got company. 3 ships from the initial fleet are reporting critical damage. The UES Courage lost main power and the UES Ranger is venting atmosphere. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, thinking. When he opened them, his voice was calm and steady. Lisa, plot rescue courses for both ships. We're not leaving anyone behind. Captain, said Amy Walsh from Communications, the Courage is saying they can't restart their engines. They're drifting toward a gravity well. Tony, can we tow them? Tony's voice came from under the console. Not with our tractor beam, but I might be able to rig something with the cargo bay magnetic clamps. Jake nodded. Do it, Rick. Prepare a boarding party for the Ranger. We'll get their crew and abandon the ship if we have to. For the next 6 hours, the Defiance worked to save their fellow humans. Tony's improvised towing system worked, barely, pulling the Courage away from the gravity well. Rick's Marines successfully evacuated the Ranger's crew before the ship was torn apart by spatial distortions. As they continued deeper into the nebula, more ships were lost. The UES Victory simply vanished, folded into a dimension that didn't exist. The UES Honor was crushed by gravitational forces that compressed it into the size of a basketball. But the surviving ships kept moving forward. When their navigation computers failed, the human crews switched to manual calculations. When their shields collapsed, they improvised new ones using debris from destroyed vessels. When the radiation levels spiked beyond safe limits, they rotated crew duties to spread the exposure. This is impossible, muttered Dr. Carl Jensen as he worked on repairing a damaged sensor array. No species should be able to survive this. Amy looked up from her station. That's probably why we're the only ones who tried. After 3 days of fighting through the nebula, they finally emerged on the other side. What they saw made everyone on the bridge fall silent. Sanctuary Prime hung in space before them, a world unlike anything they had ever seen. It appeared to be made of crystallized light, with cities that looked like frozen rainbows. Beautiful streams of energy flowed between floating continents, and the entire planet seemed to pulse with gentle musical vibrations. But the beauty was being destroyed. Dark spheres of absolute nothingness were growing across the planet's surface. Where they touched, everything simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, but completely erased as if it had never been there at all. My God, whispered Lisa. What are those things? Jake stared at the viewing screen. The void swarm. The dark spheres moved with purpose, spreading across the planet like an infection. Around them, space itself seemed to bend and twist. Several smaller spheres floated in orbit. Slowly consuming the planet's moons, Captain, Amy said quietly. I'm receiving a transmission from the planet. Put it through. The main screen changed to show a figure of pure light, similar to the one from the original distress call, but clearly different. This being looked older, more tired, and its light was flickering like a candle in the wind. Human vessels, this is Elder Zephyr. I must confess, when we sent our call for help, we did not expect your species to respond. Most consider you too primitive to be of assistance in such matters. Jake stepped forward. Elder Zephyr, we're here to help. What can you tell us about these void entities? The Elder's form shifted, showing what might have been surprise. You came knowing nothing about what you would face? We came because you asked for help, Jake said simply. That's what humans do. For a long moment, the Elder was silent. When he spoke again, his voice carried something that might have been wonder. Your species continues to amaze us. Very well. I will tell you what we know. The screen showed images of the Void Swarm's attacks on other worlds. They are entities from outside our reality. They consume matter, energy, and the fundamental forces that hold space together. We believe they are intelligent, but their intelligence is so alien that communication is impossible. Colonel Hayes studied the tactical display. How do you fight something like that? We do not fight them, Elder Zephyr said. We have maintained protective barriers around the core of our world, but they are failing. Soon all will be consumed. Dr. Helen Brooks leaned forward. Elder, with respect, that's not how humans approach problems. We don't just maintain barriers. We find ways to win. The Elder's light flickered again. Young human, these entities have destroyed civilizations millions of years old. They have consumed worlds with technology beyond your comprehension. What makes you think your species can succeed where others have failed? Jake smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. Because we're too stupid to know when we're beaten. As if summoned by their conversation, one of the smaller void spheres began moving toward their fleet. As it approached, the human ship's sensors went wild. Reality itself seemed to bend around the entity. All ships, red alert, Jake announced. This is what we came here to do. Let's show the galaxy what humans are made of. The sphere moved closer and space around it began to twist into impossible shapes. But instead of fleeing like every other species would have done, the human fleet moved to intercept Elder. Zephyr watched in astonishment as the primitive Deathworlders prepared to engage an enemy that had terrified the galaxy for millennia. Fascinating, he whispered to himself. Perhaps there is hope after all. The first attack was a disaster. The human fleet approached the void entity with standard military formation, weapons charged and shields at maximum. When they opened fire, their energy beams simply disappeared into the dark sphere without effect. Kinetic rounds passed through it as if it wasn't there. Even their most powerful missiles vanished without a trace. The entity's response was swift and terrible. It expanded suddenly, engulfing the frigate UES Justice. The ship didn't explode or break apart. It simply ceased to exist, leaving behind empty space where it had been. All ships retreat, Jake ordered, his voice tight with shock. Fall back to minimum safe distance. The surviving ships pulled back while the void entity continued its slow advance toward Sanctuary Prime. On the bridge of the Defiance, the crew tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The energy readings don't make sense, Tony said, staring at his instruments. It's like the thing exists in a different set of physical laws. Dr. Helen Brooks shook her head. Our weapons had no effect at all. How do you fight something that reality itself doesn't seem to apply to? Colonel Rick Hayes paced back and forth near the tactical station. There has to be a way. Everything can be destroyed if you hit it hard enough and in the right place. Dr. Carl Jensen looked up from his research station. Actually, Colonel, that might not be true here. I've been analyzing the entity's behavior, and I think I understand why conventional tactics fail. Jake turned to face him. Explain. Carl activated a holographic display showing the recent battle. Every galactic civilization develops along similar lines. They create more powerful weapons, stronger shields, faster ships. They follow logical patterns of advancement. The Void Swarm has encountered thousands of such civilizations over millions of years. So they've learned to counter logical tactics, Amy said. Exactly. But humans, Carl paused, choosing his words carefully. Humans don't follow logical patterns. We adapt and improvise in ways that make no sense to anyone else. Rick stopped pacing. You're saying we need to fight them in a way they don't expect? More than that, Carl said. We need to fight them in a way that no rational species would ever consider. Jake was beginning to understand. What do you have in mind? Before Carl could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the ship. Amy's voice cut through the noise. Captain, we're getting a distress signal from the surface of Sanctuary Prime. A small group of keepers is trapped in a facility that's about to be overrun. Jake looked at the tactical display. 3 void entities were converging on a crystalline structure near the planet's north pole. How long do they have? Maybe an hour, Amy replied. Rick was already suiting up for combat. Captain, request permission to take a boarding party down there. Rick, those things destroyed our ship just by touching it. What makes you think you can fight them on the ground? Rick grinned, and there was something wild in his expression. Because I'm not going to fight them the way they expect. 3 hours later, Marine Sergeant Sam Turner found himself crouched in the ruins of a keeper library. Watching a void entity slowly consume the building around him, his squad had been trying to evacuate the trapped keepers when the entity arrived. Most of his team was already gone, not dead, but simply erased from existence. The entity moved through the building like a slow tide of nothingness, deleting everything it touched. Sam clutched an improvised explosive device he had cobbled together from spare power cells and chemical supplies. It was the kind of weapon that would make any civilized engineer horrified. Unstable, unpredictable, and completely against safety regulations. Turner to base. He whispered into his communicator. I'm going to try something stupid. Define stupid, came Rick's voice. I'm going to charge directly at the thing and detonate this bomb inside it. There was a pause. Sam, that's insane. You'll be killed. Maybe. But maybe it'll work. Sam took a deep breath and ran straight at the void entity. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, but he kept running. As he approached the dark sphere, reality began to twist around him. His vision blurred, his hearing failed, and he felt like he was falling in 12 directions at once. At the last second, he dove into the entity and triggered his improvised bomb. The explosion that followed defied description. It wasn't just light and sound, but a tearing in the fabric of space itself. The void entity writhed and contracted, its perfect sphere becoming irregular and unstable. For just a moment, its advance stopped. Sam found himself lying on the ground, somehow still alive, as the entity reformed and continued its advance. But in that moment of disruption, Elder Zephyr and his people had managed to strengthen their protective barriers around that section of the building. It worked, Sam whispered into his communicator. Not for long, but it worked. The news spread quickly through the human fleet. They couldn't destroy the void entities, but they could disrupt them, and disruption was enough to buy time. Jake assembled his senior staff in the Defiance's war room. We need to change our entire approach. Forget everything we know about conventional warfare. Dr. Helen Brooks had been working on biological weapons, something no civilized species would consider using. I've been analyzing the energy signatures from Sam's explosion. The entities seem vulnerable to chaotic energy patterns, things that don't follow predictable laws. Tony had been modifying their weapon systems. I've been thinking about what Carl said, about doing things no rational species would try. What if we start ramming them with our ships? Lisa looked up from her navigation charts. Or we could try flying directly through them. It might disrupt their cohesion. Amy was monitoring communications from across the galaxy. Captain, the other Federation species are watching us. They think we're committing suicide, but some of them are starting to take notes on our tactics. Dr. Carl Jensen had made the most important discovery. I've been studying the historical records more carefully. Every species that encountered void entities tried to preserve their ships, their people, their technology. They fought defensively, and, Jake asked, we're the first species in galactic history that's willing to sacrifice everything to win. The Void Swarm has never encountered opponents who consider their own survival secondary to completing the mission. Rick nodded slowly. They've adapted to fight logical enemies who try to minimize losses. But humans, he smiled grimly, humans don't minimize losses. We maximize damage to the enemy. Jake stood up and walked to the window that showed Sanctuary Prime. The beautiful world was half consumed now, dark spheres of nothingness spreading across its surface like a disease. All right, he said. We're going to do something that no sane species would attempt. We're going to save the Keepers by embracing complete insanity. He turned back to his crew. Start preparing every ship for ramming attacks. Modify our weapons to create the most chaotic energy patterns possible. And get me volunteers for suicide missions. Amy stared at him. Captain, you're talking about essentially guaranteeing our deaths. Jake nodded. Yes, but we're also talking about saving an entire civilization. That's worth it. As word spread through the fleet, something remarkable happened. Instead of protests or requests for transfer, every single human volunteered for the most dangerous assignments. They understood what Jake was asking of them, and they accepted it without question. The galaxy watched in amazement and horror as the Deathworlders prepared to do the impossible. The final battle began at dawn on Sanctuary Prime. Though dawn was a relative concept on a world where half the surface had been erased from existence, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as his fleet prepared for what every computer model said was certain suicide. Around Sanctuary Prime, dozens of void entities had gathered, their dark spheres growing larger as they consumed more of reality itself. All ships report ready for final assault. Amy Walsh announced from her communication station. Jake activated the fleet-wide channel. This is Captain Morrison to all vessels. We all know what we're here to do. We're going to ram these things with everything we have. The goal isn't to survive. The goal is to disrupt them long enough for the Keepers to escape. Dr. Helen Brooks looked up from her medical station. Captain, I want you to know that it's been an honor serving with you. Tony Rodriguez called out from engineering. The engines are running at 110% capacity. We'll have about 15 minutes before they overload. Lisa Carter checked her navigation one last time. Course plotted for the largest entity, the one attacking the Keeper's main city. Colonel Rick Hayes stood ready with his Marine detachment. My people are prepared for boarding actions on any entities that survive the ramming. Jake took a deep breath. All ships, this is it. Attack pattern Morrison, for humanity, for the Keepers, and for everyone who believes that helping others is worth any price. The human fleet charged forward in a formation that would have horrified any military academy instructor. Instead of maintaining safe distances and coordinated fire, They flew directly at the void entities in what appeared to be a completely disorganized mass attack. The first ship to make contact was the destroyer UES Fearless. Captain Emma Foster aimed her vessel directly at a medium-sized entity and fired every weapon she had during the final approach. The ship disappeared into the dark sphere, but instead of simply vanishing like before, the entity convulsed and twisted. "It's working," Amy shouted. "The entity's cohesion is destabilizing." More ships followed. The cruiser UES Relentless, commanded by Captain Ben Parker, detonated its antimatter stores just as it made contact. The explosion tore a hole in reality itself, and the void entity recoiled like a living thing in pain. Jake watched as ship after ship sacrificed itself. Each impact disrupted the entities more than the last, as if the chaotic nature of the attacks was confusing whatever intelligence guided the void swarm. "Lisa, take us in," Jake ordered. The Defiance accelerated toward the largest entity, the one that was consuming the Keeper's capital city. As they approached, Jake could see the beautiful crystalline structures being erased bit by bit. "Tony, prepare to overload the jump drive on my mark," Jake called out. "Captain, overloading the jump drive will create a spatial rift," Tony warned. "The explosion will tear a hole between dimensions." "That's the idea," Jake replied. As the Defiance neared the entity, space around them began to twist. Reality bent in impossible directions, and the crew felt like they were falling through a kaleidoscope. But they kept flying forward. "Now," Jake shouted. Tony triggered the overload sequence just as the ship penetrated the entity's outer boundary. For a moment that lasted forever, the Defiance existed in a space between realities, where the normal laws of physics had no meaning. Then the jump drive exploded. The detonation created a cascade effect that rippled through dimensions. The massive void entity that had been consuming the Keeper city writhed and contracted, its perfect darkness becoming chaotic and unstable. Cracks of brilliant light appeared across its surface. Jake found himself lying on the bridge floor, somehow still alive. Around him, his crew was picking themselves up and checking their stations. "Status report," he called out weakly. Amy checked her instruments. "Captain, we're still here. The ship is heavily damaged but intact." Lisa stared at her navigation display in disbelief. "The entity is retreating." "Not just ours, all of them. They're pulling back from the planet." Through the main viewing screen, they could see the void entities gathering together in space above Sanctuary Prime. Their perfect spheres were no longer perfect, showing cracks and distortions from the human attacks. Elder Zephyr's image appeared on the communication screen. For the first time since they had met him, the ancient being seemed speechless. "Human vessels," he finally said. "What you have done should be impossible. The void swarm has never retreated from a target before." Jake struggled to his feet. "Elder, we disrupted them, but I don't think we destroyed them. What's going to stop them from regrouping and trying again?" The Elder's form shifted, showing what might have been amazement. "Captain Morrison, I do not think you understand what you have accomplished. The Void Swarm operates on the principle that all intelligent life follows predictable patterns. They have consumed civilizations across the galaxy for millions of years because every species they encountered responded logically to threats. And we didn't," Amy said with understanding. "You embraced complete chaos," Elder Zephyr confirmed. "You attacked with strategies that no rational being would consider. You sacrificed your own survival for the chance to help strangers. The swarm's intelligence cannot process such behavior." As they watched, the gathered void entities began to fade, becoming translucent and insubstantial. "They are returning to whatever dimension they came from," the Elder explained. "Your chaotic attack patterns have convinced them that this reality contains threats they cannot understand or predict. They will not return." Jake looked around at his battered crew, then at the damaged ships of his fleet. They had lost over half their vessels, and hundreds of humans had died in the final assault. But Sanctuary Prime was safe. "Elder," Jake said, "we did what we came to do. The Keepers are safe and the Void Swarm is gone." "Indeed," Elder Zephyr replied, "but I suspect this encounter will have consequences neither of us anticipated." Over the following days, as rescue ships arrived from human space, reports came in from across the galaxy. The other Federation species had watched the entire battle through long-range sensors. The Ethereal Collective requested detailed reports on human combat doctrine. The Resonance Empire asked for formal diplomatic discussions about asymmetric defense strategies. Even the Proud Machine Collective admitted that their probability calculations had been incomplete. Dr. Carl Jensen, while helping coordinate the evacuation of wounded keepers, received a message that made him laugh out loud. "What's so funny?" Dr. Helen Brooks asked. Carl showed her the message on his datapad. "The Galactic Council has officially reclassified humanity's threat level. We're no longer considered a minor species." "What's our new classification?" Carl grinned. "Emergency response specialists. Apparently we're now the species other civilizations call when the impossible needs to be accomplished." Admiral Kate Sullivan arrived with the rescue fleet 3 days later. She found Jake on the observation deck of the rebuilt Defiance, looking out at Sanctuary Prime as the Keepers worked to restore their damaged world. "Captain," she said, joining him at the window, "the President wants to give you and your crew the Federation's highest honor for saving the Keepers." Jake shook his head. "Admiral, we just did what humans do. Someone called for help, so we helped them." Kate smiled. "That's exactly why the galaxy needs us, Jake. Every other species in the Federation has become so civilized, so logical, so efficient, that they've forgotten what it means to simply help someone because it's the right thing to do." She handed him a message pad. This came in from Elder Zephyr. He wants to know if humanity would be willing to serve as the Federation's special response team for future impossible situations. Jake read the message and laughed. "So we went from being too primitive for galactic civilization to being the species they call when galactic civilization isn't enough." "Apparently," Kate said. "The other species are calling us the Deathworlders now. They mean it as a compliment." Jake looked back out at Sanctuary Prime, where beings of pure light were rebuilding their cities with help from human engineers who insisted that impossible was just another word for challenging. "Admiral," he said, "I think I can live with that title." As the rescue fleet prepared to return to human space, Elder Zephyr sent one final message to Earth. It was broadcast across all Federation channels, ensuring that every species in the galaxy would hear it. "To the humans of Earth," the message began, "you have shown us something we had forgotten in our millions of years of existence. When faced with the impossible, most species calculate the odds and retreat. But you calculate the odds, ignore them completely, and charge forward anyway. The galaxy is safer because of your courage, and wiser because of your example." The message ended with words that would become humanity's unofficial motto among the stars. "When the call goes out to all, and only the Deathworlders take it seriously, the universe is fortunate indeed that Deathworlders exist."